You did not choose this. One moment you were moving through your day, and then a door closed. A voice gave an order, and your freedom was taken. Your body registered the threat before your mind finished processing it. Right now, inside a captive human body, a cascade of biological commands has already been issued. The question is not whether your body will respond. It already has. The question is what it does next and how long it can sustain it.
This is not a thought experiment. This is a forensic breakdown of what actually happens inside a human body, hour by hour, when it is taken hostage. Welcome back to Body versus the Brink, where we document the invisible war happening inside you, second by second, organ by organ. Today's case is a hostage situation, not the negotiation happening in the room, the negotiation happening inside your cells. By the end of this breakdown, you will know exactly what your nervous system does in the first 60 seconds of capture, how your biology shifts when escape becomes impossible, and what happens to a body that is forced to survive on sustained terror for hours at a time. Let's open the case file. The moment your brain registers that you have lost control of the situation, your locus coeruleus, the brain's central alarm system, fires a signal that propagates through your entire nervous system in under half a second. This is not fear as you experience it emotionally. This is fear as a biological command protocol, and it executes faster than conscious thought. Your sympathetic nervous system assumes full operational control. Epinephrine and norepinephrine flood the bloodstream simultaneously. Heart rate surges. In documented cases of acute restraint trauma, heart rates have been recorded exceeding 160 beats per minute within the first 30 seconds. Blood pressure spikes, pupils dilate, respiration accelerates. Every non-essential biological process receives the same signal: suspend operations. Here is what makes the hostage scenario physiologically distinct from other acute threats. Your body activates a full combat response, and then is given nothing to do with it. In a physical fight, the energy has an outlet. In a burial scenario, there is a physical container to struggle against. In captivity, the body fires every weapon in its arsenal, and then holds position. The adrenaline has nowhere to go. The cortisol begins to accumulate. The biological machine is running at maximum throttle, idling in place. This is not a sustainable state, and your body knows it. What it does next is one of the most complex adaptive sequences in human physiology. Within the first 30 to 60 minutes, if escape or resolution has not occurred, your biology begins what physiologists call the second phase stress response. The initial epinephrine surge begins to level, but your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the HPA axis, is now fully activated, and it begins releasing cortisol in a sustained escalating wave. This is the point where the hostage body diverges from nearly every other acute stress scenario. Cortisol is not a crisis drug, it is a maintenance drug. Its job is to keep you functional over hours, not seconds. It mobilizes glucose from your liver. It suppresses pain signaling to keep you operational despite injury. It dials down your immune response. Inflammation is expensive, and your body has decided it cannot afford it right now. But cortisol at sustained high levels is also corrosive. It begins degrading the hippocampus, the brain region responsible for memory formation and spatial awareness. This is why hostage survivors frequently report distorted time perception, fragmented memories of their captivity, and an inability to reconstruct the sequence of events afterward. The brain is being chemically remodeled by the very hormones keeping it alive. Meanwhile, your prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational planning, is losing processing bandwidth to the limbic system. You are becoming more reactive and less deliberate. Not because you are weak, because your biology is making a calculated trade: fast, instinctive response over slow, rational analysis. In a room where anything could happen at any moment, Instinct is the more survivable operating system. Something remarkable happens between hours 2 and 4 that separates human captivity biology from almost every other survival scenario. The body does not simply sustain the stress response, it begins to adapt to it. This process is called allostatic adjustment, and it is your biology's attempt to find a new equilibrium inside an abnormal situation. Cortisol levels, which have been climbing, begin to regulate around a new elevated baseline. Your heart rate, which spiked violently in the first minutes, gradually modulates downward, not to normal, but to a functional elevated state. Your brain begins shifting resources toward hypervigilance rather than raw panic. The amygdala remains on constant high alert, scanning for threat signals, changes in voice tone, footsteps, light shifts, movement near the door. But the catastrophic flood of initial terror chemicals begins to convert into something more sustainable, a state of prolonged, controlled fear. This is where psychological and biological responses become almost impossible to separate. Documented survivor accounts from hostage situations consistently describe an acute period of terrifying clarity, a hyper-focused awareness of sensory detail, the sound of breathing in the next room, the specific weight of silence, the texture of the floor. This is not imagination. It is your sensory cortex running at elevated gain, amplifying every input in the search for information that might predict what comes next. Your body is not suffering. It is scanning. It is solving. It has converted panic into intelligence gathering because that is the most useful thing it can do with the resources it has. After 4 hours and beyond, in situations where captivity extends into the deep biological window, the body begins showing the costs of its own emergency protocols. This is not failure. This is the predictable output of a system that was designed for short-duration crises, now being asked to run indefinitely. Cortisol suppression of the immune system, which began as an energy conservation measure, starts to create real vulnerability. Inflammatory responses are delayed. Wound healing is compromised. The digestive system has been offline since the first minutes. Blood flow to the gut remains near zero, and the body has no intention of reinstating it while the threat persists. Muscle tissue, deprived of normal metabolic cycling, begins low-level catabolism, the same protein breakdown seen in any prolonged stress state, quietly consuming non-essential tissue to keep the heart and brain fueled. The brain, meanwhile, begins producing something that looks almost paradoxical from the outside: dissociation. Under prolonged, inescapable stress, the brain triggers a protective psychological distancing mechanism, a partial disconnection from the immediate sensory environment. This is not a breakdown. Neuroscientists classify it as an adaptive survival response. The brain is managing its own terror load by creating psychological distance from the situation it cannot physically escape. Survivors describe watching events from a slight remove, present, but not fully inside the experience. The brain has created its own internal exit when the physical one remains closed. Through all of this, the heart continues. Elevated, stressed, chemically battered, but continuing. Let's close the case file. The human body inside a hostage situation does not simply endure, it executes. From the first half-second alarm signal to the hours-long cortisol maintenance wave, from allostatic adjustment to dissociative protection, every response is a precisely ordered biological protocol running exactly as designed. What this forensic breakdown reveals is a body optimized not just for survival against physical threats, but for survival against something more psychologically complex: prolonged helplessness. The fact that the human nervous system has a dedicated protocol for sustained captivity, a second-phase response, a hypervigilance mode, a dissociative safety valve, tells us something important about our evolutionary history. This scenario was not rare enough to go unaddressed by natural selection. The biology was written for it. And as with the burial scenario, the verdict is the same. The body is always willing. It never stops negotiating. The cortisol floods and the hippocampus takes damage and the immune system goes quiet and the muscles slowly consume themselves. And through all of it, the body keeps issuing commands, keeps running protocols, keeps the heart beating and the eyes scanning and the brain processing. It does not ask whether survival is likely. It does not calculate odds. It simply executes every time without consultation. The biology does not surrender. It is the environment, the room, the door, the people holding the keys that determines whether the fight can be won. If something shifted in your chest during this breakdown, a tightness, a hyper-awareness, a slightly elevated pulse, that is not coincidence. That is your amygdala doing exactly what this case file described, running a threat simulation in real time, just from words and information. The biology does not distinguish between a vivid description and a real room. If you want to keep going deeper into what your body does at the absolute edge, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next case. And I want to hear from you. Which adaptation surprised you most? The allostatic adjustment or the dissociation response? Drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching Body versus the Brink, standing witness at the threshold of biological collapse. See you at the edge.